Hi Geometry Nation! Today we are going to talk about trigonometry, which is sine, cosine, and tangent. First definition we have is a trigonomic ratio, which is a ratio of sides in a right triangle. It needs to be a right triangle, and you'll see why, but only sine, cosine, tangent can be in a right triangle. Looking at this, we have three trigonomic ratios. Like I just said, the first one is sine. The abbreviation is SIN, and that's sine. We also have cosine. The abbreviation is COS. And then we have tangent, and that abbreviation is TAN. So sine, cosine, tangent. We're going to use those three ratios in our right triangles. One very helpful resource, or way to think of it, is what's called SOHCAHTOA. This is going to be your lifesaver for trig. So if you need to write this on top of every note sheet, every practice page, on top of your quiz, do so. It writes out what SOHCAHTOA, what sine, cosine, tangent are. So let's look at this individually. The first one here is SO. That stands for sine in the S. OH means we're going to have the opposite side over the hypotenuse side. That's what the O and the H represent. Looking at the so COHCAHTOA. This C stands for cosine. The next letter is A, which is adjacent, over H, which is hypotenuse. I'll explain what that opposite adjacent hypotenuse is in a quick second. Then you have TOA. The T stands for tangent. O means opposite, over A, which is adjacent. SOHCAHTOA comes in handy. If you have cosine, you know the ratio is A over H because of the CAH here. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. Super helpful. Now you have to look at this problem. We're looking at sine of C, cosine of C, tangent of C. So this angle C is what I like to call the angle of focus. Everything is based off of angle C. The side opposite of angle C is this side over here. So let's label it with a big O for opposite side of my angle. The adjacent side is the side touching the angle that is not the hypotenuse. So I'm going to put a big A on this side. Then the hypotenuse, which we have talked about a lot, is across from the 90 degrees. I'm going to label that H. At the beginning of every problem, I suggest find your angle, which is going to be the letter that follows your trig, and label your opposite adjacent hypotenuse side. First step I suggest doing. Now we're going to actually plug in the values. So for sine of C, sine is opposite. The opposite side here is AB over the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse is side AC. That would be sine of C, the opposite side over the hypotenuse side. What about cosine? Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. The adjacent side is marked with an A, so it's BC over the same hypotenuse of AC. Tangent is O over A, so opposite side is AB. Adjacent side is BC. all comes from when I labeled my OAH. Now let's try it with some numbers. So let's head down to now example 2. Notice for the first set right here, all the angle of focus is angle K. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to look at K as my angle of focus, label my opposite side, my adjacent side that touches the angle, and then my hypotenuse. That's going to be for these three because the angle of focus is K. Now let's use our ratios that we learned above. I'm going to write again SOHCAHTOA because it's not part of the page anymore. And I'm going to use this to help me through. Sine is the S at the beginning, means O over H. Opposite over hypotenuse. Looking at my picture, the side that is O is 32. The hypotenuse is 40. Make sure you simplify this. You always want the simple fraction, which turns out to be 4/5. Next one is cosine. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So that means A over H. Look at your picture. The side length with A is 24. The side length with H is 40. And you need to simplify and you'll get 3/5. Last one is tangent. So that's the TOA. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. So O over A. The O side is 32. The adjacent side is 24. Simplify, you get 4/3. And now you just did your first example with actual numbers. Now for these three, the angle of focus is J, which means I need to fix my picture. So I'm going to actually erase my OAH because now J is my angle of focus because J is in the parentheses. So looking at J, the opposite side is now this side. The adjacent side that touches the angle is 32. And the hypotenuse stays the same because, again, it's still over across from at 90 degrees. Same thing. Sine is O over H. Cosine is A over H. And tangent is O over A. I got that just from SOHCAHTOA. Please pause the video really fast and see if you can fill in these ratios. Hopefully you paused, and let's fill in what we got. O is 24 over 40. So you get 3/5. You should get 32 over 40 in this case. And you should get 24 over 32, which is 3/4. If you made any mistakes, please go back. I think the biggest thing is making sure you label your OAH in your triangle. Last one. Here, we're actually missing a side length. We're missing TR. That needs to be the first thing you find when you're doing your trig ratios because it is the ratio of the sides. Well, don't worry there. We have done plenty of work with a side of a triangle and the hypotenuse. So we're just going to whip out a nice Pythagorean theorem. 24 squared plus my side length squared is going to equal my hypotenuse squared. Please be aware that the 26 is the C value because it's across from the 90. Okay, Doing the math, you'll get 576 plus x squared equals 676. Getting x squared by itself, you'll get 100. And we find out this side length right here is 10. First step you have to do. Circle that so that we have it. Oops, never mind, I will not. Now we can do our trigs. The angle of focus for these three is S. So looking at S, angle of focus, this will be the opposite, the adjacent, and the hypotenuse is across from the 90. Let's fill out our ratio. Sine is O over H. Cosine is A over H. Tangent is O over A. That comes straight from the SOHCAHTOA right here. Okay, it's highlighted for a reason. You always want to use it. Now, because we have the OAH labeled, let's fill it out. O here is 10. Hypotenuse is 26. Simplify that to 5/13. A over H, A is 24. H is 26. Simplify that just by 2. 12 over 13. And then the tangent. O over A equals 5 over 12. Much easier now that we have all the values, right? Almost done. We're now going to do these three, but notice the angle of focus is R now. So go to your picture, erase your OAH because we need to start fresh with now angle R being the angle of focus. This side becomes opposite. This is the adjacent, and 26 is still the hypotenuse. Please pause the video and see if you can find those three trig functions. Hopefully you did so. At the very end, let's check your answers. This should be 12 over 13, 5 over 13, and 12 over 5. If you were not able to get those three, please go back, look at the work we've done for the past two examples, make sure your SOHCAHTOA is correct, and make sure that you simplified. One last thing before I let you go. A little note over here. Did you notice that your sine and cosine ratios, so the first two in each, are actually between 0 and 1? Well, that should always be true. If they happen to be negative, or if they happen to be greater than 1, you did something wrong. Tangent, on the other hand, is any value greater than 0. Right? It could be over 1, could be less than 1, a bunch of values, but it's a good way to check your answers. Okay, make sure you show the ratios and you're simplifying, and that is SOHCAHTOA. Have a great day, everyone.